what I want to leave behind. A legacy of words, wisdom, and kindness. An intimate journey through the invisible gifts we pass on. In the end, we are not measured by what we accumulate, but by what we give away. This is the story of the invisible inheritance we all carry and the one we choose to leave behind. Hello, dear friend. Yes, you sitting there with this book in your hands or these words in your ears. I want you to know that I'm speaking directly to you, as if we're sitting together on a porch swing, watching the sun set over a life well lived. This isn't a lecture or a self-help manual. This is a conversation between souls about the most important question we'll ever face. What do we want to leave behind when we're gone? I've been thinking about this question for years now, ever since my grandmother passed away and left me not with jewels or money, but with something far more precious: her stories, her laughter lines, and the way she made everyone feel like they mattered. That's when I realized that the most valuable inheritance isn't what we can hold in our hands, but what we carry in our hearts. So pour yourself a cup of tea, settle into your favorite chair, and let's talk about the legacy that really matters. Let's talk about love, forgiveness, the stories that shape us, and the invisible threads that connect us all. Let's talk about what it means to live a life worth remembering. Chapter 1: The Weight of Invisible Things. I remember the exact moment I understood what legacy really meant. It wasn't in a lawyer's office or at the reading of a will. It was in my kitchen, watching my daughter comfort her crying toddler with the exact same gentle humming sound my mother used to make when I was scared as a child. 3 generations of women, connected by an invisible thread of tenderness that had somehow survived decades, distance, and the inevitable changes that time brings. In that moment, I realized I was witnessing something more powerful than any inheritance I was seeing. Love in action, passed down like a sacred recipe from mother to daughter to granddaughter. That's the thing about the legacy that matters most. It's not written in documents or locked in safe deposit boxes. It lives in the way we hold our children when they're afraid, in the stories we tell around dinner tables, in the kindness we show to strangers who will never know our names. It's weightless, and yet it carries the full gravity of human connection. We spend so much of our lives accumulating things: houses, cars, bank accounts, achievements. We measure success by what we can see and count. But have you ever noticed that the moments that touch us most deeply are often the ones that leave no physical trace? The conversation that changed your perspective, the hug that healed an old wound, the stranger who smiled at you on your worst day and reminded you that you weren't alone. I think about my grandfather, who died when I was 12. He wasn't a wealthy man by any measure. He lived in a small house with creaky floors and wallpaper that had seen better days. But he had this way of making everyone feel special. When I visited, he would stop whatever he was doing, reading his newspaper, tending his garden, fixing something that was broken, and give me his complete attention. He would ask about my dreams, as if they were the most important things in the world. Years later, when I became a mother myself, I found myself doing the same thing with my own children. I didn't consciously decide to inherit this trait from him. It just happened, the way good things often do when we're not paying attention. His gift to me wasn't money or property, it was the understanding that everyone deserves to feel heard, to feel valued, to feel like they matter. This is what I mean by the weight of invisible things. They don't register on any scale, but they shape us in ways that last long after the person who gave them to us is gone. They become part of who we are, part of what we pass on to others, often without even realizing it. Think about the people who have shaped you most profoundly. I'm willing to bet it wasn't because of what they owned, but because of who they were. The teacher who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. The friend who listened without judgment during your darkest hour. The parent who showed you what unconditional love looks like, especially when you were being completely unlovable. These people left their mark on your soul, not your bank account. They changed your trajectory, opened your heart, showed you new ways of being in the world. And now you carry them with you, whether you realize it or not. In the way you treat others, in the values you hold dear, in the moments when their wisdom whispers to you across the years. This is the legacy we all have the power to create. not through grand gestures or expensive gifts, but through the daily choice to love, to listen, to show up for the people in our lives. Through the stories we tell, the kindness we offer, the forgiveness we extend, and the way we choose to see the world. As I write this, I can almost hear my grandmother's voice saying what she used to tell me when I was young and worried about the future. Sweetheart, the most important things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be given freely and received with an open heart. She was right, of course. She usually was. And now, decades later, I want to give you the same gift she gave me, the understanding that your life has meaning not because of what you accumulate, but because of what you contribute to the invisible treasury of human connection and love. So let's talk about that treasury. Let's explore what it means to invest in things that matter, to build a legacy that will outlast any monument, to leave behind a piece of ourselves that makes the world a little bit better, a little bit kinder, a little bit more hopeful. Because that's what we're really here for, isn't it? Not to gather things, but to give things. Not to be remembered for what we had, but for who we were and how we loved. Chapter 2. Love Letters to the Future. If I could write a letter to every person who will come after, Memi children, their children, and strangers I'll never meet, what would I want them to know about love? Not the fairy tale version we see in movies, but the real, messy, complicated, beautiful thing that actually sustains us through this life. I would start by telling them that love is not a feeling you fall into, like tumbling down a rabbit hole. Love is a choice you make every single day, sometimes every single hour, sometimes every single minute when life gets particularly difficult. It's the choice to see the best in someone, even when they're showing you their worst. It's the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. It's the choice to forgive when holding a grudge would feel more satisfying. I learned this lesson the hard way, as most important lessons are learned. I was married young to a man I thought I knew completely, only to discover that people are infinite and mysterious and capable of surprising you in ways both wonderful and terrible. We went through years when love felt like nothing more than stubbornness, a refusal to give up on something we had built together, even when it seemed to be crumbling around us. There were nights when I lay awake wondering if love was supposed to be this hard, this requiring of constant maintenance and care. Shouldn't it be effortless? Shouldn't it just happen naturally, like breathing? But then I would watch my parents, married for 43 years, and I would see the way my father still brought my mother coffee every morning, made exactly the way she liked it. I would see the way she still laughed at his terrible jokes, not because they were funny, but because his joy in telling them was infectious. I would see them choose each other over and over again, through illness and financial stress and the ordinary challenges that wear down so many relationships. That's when I understood that love is not a noun, it's a verb. It's something you do, not something you have. It's the accumulation of 1,000,000 small kindnesses, 1,000 acts of patience, countless moments of choosing to see your beloved as the gift they are, rather than the burden they sometimes feel like. I want to leave behind the understanding that love multiplies when it's shared. The love you give to your children doesn't diminish the love you have for your spouse. The affection you show your friends doesn't subtract from your family relationships. Love is not a finite resource that gets depleted with use. It's like a candle that can light countless other candles without diminishing its own flame. This is perhaps the most radical thing I can tell you about love. It grows by being given away. The more generously you love, the more capacity for love you develop. It's the opposite of everything else in life, where using something means having less of it. With love, using it means having more. I think about the way my children have taught me this truth. Before I became a mother, I thought I knew what love was. I had loved my parents, my siblings, my husband, but the love I felt for these tiny humans who grew inside my body and then demanded everything from Memi sleep, my energy, my patience, my very sense of self. That love cracked me open in ways I never expected. It was fierce and protective and absolutely irrational. I would have fought tigers for these children. I would have moved mountains. I would have given up everything I thought was important about myself to keep them safe and happy. And in doing so, I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. But here's what surprised me most. Loving them so completely didn't make me love others less. It made me love others more. Having children made me understand how every person walking around is someone's beloved child. The teenager with the purple hair and the attitude, someone's precious baby. The elderly man moving slowly through the grocery store line, someone's treasured father, grandfather, son. This is the kind of love I want to leave behind as a legacy. Not just the love that stays within the safe boundaries of family and friendship, but the love that spills over into the world. The love that sees the humanity in everyone we encounter. The love that offers patience to the harried store clerk, kindness to the lost tourist, forgiveness to the person who cuts us off in traffic because maybe they're rushing to see someone they love. I want to be remembered as someone who loved without conditions, who saw the best in people even when they couldn't see it in themselves, who believed that every person deserves to be cherished simply because they exist. Because here's what I've learned in my decades on this earth. We are all walking around with invisible wounds, carrying burdens that others can't see, fighting battles that we never talk about. And the antidote to all of that pain, all of that struggle, all of that loneliness that seems to be the human condition, the antidote is love. Not romantic love necessarily, though that's wonderful when it happens, but the broader love that recognizes our shared humanity. The love that says, I see you, I acknowledge your struggle, I believe you have value. The love that offers a smile to a stranger, a listening ear to a friend, a helping hand to someone in need. This is the love letter I want to write to the future. That love is always the answer. When you don't know what to do, choose love. When you're angry or hurt or afraid, choose love. When someone disappoints you or betrays you or breaks your heart, choose love, and not because they deserve it, but because you do. Because choosing love over and over again is what makes us fully human. And sometimes love looks like letting go. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to release someone from your expectations, to stop trying to change them into who you think they should be, and start accepting them for who they are. Sometimes love means saying goodbye. Sometimes it means forgiving without receiving an apology. Sometimes it means loving someone from a distance, because being close is too painful for both of you. But even that kind of love, the love that releases, the love that steps back, the love that says goodbye, even that is a gift. It's the gift of freedom, the gift of space to grow, the gift of dignity and autonomy. It's perhaps the hardest kind of love to give, but it's often the most necessary. This is what I want to leave behind. The understanding that love comes in many forms, that it's always worth choosing, and that it's the only thing that truly matters in the end. Everything else, the achievements, the possessions, the status symbols we think are so important, all of that fades away. But love remains. Love echoes through generations. Love changes the world, one heart at a time. So love boldly, love generously, love without keeping score, love even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. Love not just the people who love you back, but the ones who need it most. Love the world into being a better place, one act of kindness at a time. That's the legacy I want to leave. That's the inheritance I want to pass on. Not money or property, or things that can be lost or stolen or broken. But love, endless, renewable, world-changing love. Chapter 3. The Grace of Forgiveness. Let me tell you about the heaviest burden I ever carried and how I learned to set it down. For 15 years, I carried anger toward my father like a stone in my chest. Not anger about anything dramatic or newsworthy, just the quiet disappointment of a daughter who felt unseen by the man who was supposed to know her best. He was a good man in most ways, hardworking and honest, but he had difficulty expressing emotion, difficulty showing up for the moments that mattered most to me. He missed my college graduation because of a work commitment. He forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. When I tried to talk to him about anything deeper than the weather or the local sports team, his eyes would glaze over and he'd find something else that suddenly needed his attention. I felt like I was perpetually auditioning for his love and never quite earning the part. So I built a wall, brick by brick, constructed from every slight, every disappointment, every moment when I needed him to be present and he was somewhere else entirely. I told myself I was protecting myself from further hurt, but what I was really doing was imprisoning myself with my own resentment. The anger became a familiar companion. I knew exactly how to nurture it, how to feed it with fresh evidence of his shortcomings, how to use it to justify my distance from him. It gave me a sense of righteousness, a feeling that I was the wrong party and he was the one who needed to change, to apologize, to somehow make up for all those missed moments. But carrying that anger was exhausting. It colored every interaction we had, every family gathering, every phone call. I couldn't be fully present with him because I was always defending myself against hurt that might never come, armor that had become too heavy to wear, but too familiar to remove. The turning point came, as these moments often do, in the most ordinary of circumstances. My father had a minor heart attack when he was 68, not life-threatening, but scary enough to remind us all that time isn't infinite. I spent 3 days at the hospital with him, and on the second day, when the medication made him drowsy and his usual emotional barriers were lowered, he reached for my hand. "I know I haven't been the father you needed," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on our joined hands. "I didn't know how to be. My own father never showed me. I thought providing for you was enough, but I can see now that it wasn't. In that moment, I had a choice. I could have said, 'You're right, it wasn't enough,' and continued carrying my burden of righteous anger. Or I could choose to see him not as the father who had disappointed me, but as a man who had done his best with the tools he'd been given, a man who was limited by his own upbringing and his own fears. I chose forgiveness. Not because he deserved it. Deserving has nothing to do with forgiveness. I chose it because I deserved to be free from the weight I had been carrying for so many years." "I know, Dad," I said, squeezing his hand. "It's okay." And in saying those words, I felt something shift inside my chest, as if that stone I'd been carrying had suddenly dissolved. The relief was so profound, I almost started crying right there in his hospital room. This is what I want you to understand about forgiveness. It's not something you do for the person who hurt you. It's something you do for yourself. It's not about excusing bad behavior or pretending that harm didn't occur. It's about refusing to let that harm continue to define your life, your relationships, your capacity for joy. Forgiveness is not a feeling, it's a decision. It's the choice to release someone from the debt you feel they owe you. It's the choice to stop waiting for them to make things right and to make things right within yourself instead. It's the choice to break the cycle of hurt and resentment that can be passed down through generations like a toxic inheritance. I learned this lesson again when my own daughter went through her teenage years and said things to me that cut deeper than I thought words could cut. Things like, "I hate you," and "You're ruining my life," and "I wish you weren't my mother." I knew she was in pain. That adolescence is a time of big emotions and limited impulse control, but knowing that intellectually didn't make the words hurt less. I had to forgive her daily, sometimes hourly, not because she asked for forgiveness, teenagers rarely do, but because I needed to keep my heart open to her. I needed to remember that her behavior was not about me, that she was fighting her own battles with identity and independence and the overwhelming task of figuring out who she wanted to become. And I had to forgive myself too for the times I lost my patience, for the moments when I reacted out of my own hurt rather than responding from love, for all the ways I fell short of the patient, understanding mother I wanted to be. Self-forgiveness, I've discovered, is often the hardest kind. We are our own harshest critics, our own most relentless judges. We hold ourselves to impossible standards and then punish ourselves when we inevitably fall short. We replay our mistakes over and over, as if reviewing them enough times will somehow change the outcome. But self-forgiveness is perhaps the most important gift we can give ourselves and by extension, everyone around us. When we stop beating ourselves up for being imperfect humans, we stop expecting everyone else to be perfect too. When we extend grace to ourselves, we become capable of extending it to others. I think about my mother, who spent years feeling guilty about working full-time when we were children. She would apologize to us constantly for missing school events, for serving frozen dinners, for being tired after long days at the office. It took her decades to realize that her working had taught us valuable lessons about independence, resilience, and the importance of pursuing your own dreams. "I did the best I could with what I knew at the time," she finally said to me when she was in her 70s. And I realized that this is the only standard any of us can be held to or best, given our circumstances, our limitations, our understanding at the time. This is what I want to leave behind. The understanding that forgiveness is not weakness, but strength. It's not about being a doormat or enabling bad behavior. It's about refusing to let other people's actions control your inner peace. It's about choosing love over resentment, freedom over bondage, healing over holding on to hurt. Forgiveness is a process, not a one-time event. Some hurts require us to forgive daily. Some relationships require us to set boundaries while still choosing grace. Some situations call for forgiveness from a distance, without reconciliation or continued contact. But in every case, forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. It's the key that unlocks the prison we've built around our own hearts. It's the choice to write a different ending to the story of our pain. I want to be remembered as someone who chose forgiveness over resentment, who understood that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned. I want to be remembered as someone who broke cycles of hurt rather than perpetuating them, who chose healing over harboring wounds. Because in the end, forgiveness is not about the past, it's about the future. It's about creating space for new relationships, new experiences, new possibilities. It's about refusing to let yesterday's pain rob today of its joy or tomorrow of its promise. This is the legacy of forgiveness. It frees us to love more fully, to trust more deeply, to show up more completely for the life we're actually living instead of the life we think we should have lived. It's the gift that keeps on giving, rippling out through generations, teaching by example that grace is always possible, healing is always available, and it's never too late to choose love. Chapter 4. The Stories That Shape Us. Every family has its mythology, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, where we came from, and what we're made of. These stories are passed down like heirlooms, polished with each retelling, sometimes embellished, sometimes simplified, but always carrying within them the DNA of our identity. I am the keeper of stories now. The one who remembers when great-grandmother immigrated with nothing but a suitcase and a dream, who recounts how my parents met at a church dance and knew within 5 minutes they would spend their lives together, who can still recite the exact words my grandfather said when he taught me to fish. Patience, little one. The best things in life come to those who know how to wait. But I've learned that the stories we choose to remember and retell say as much about us as they do about the people in them. We select certain memories to preserve, while letting others fade away. We emphasize the qualities we admire and hope to emulate. We create a narrative of resilience, love, humor, or strength, because those are the values we want to pass on. My grandmother was a master storyteller. She could take the most ordinary events, a trip to the grocery store, a conversation with a neighbor, a mishap in the kitchen, and turn them into epic tales that had us all in stitches. She understood something essential about stories. They're not just entertainment, they're instruction. Through her stories, she taught us how to find humor in difficult situations, how to see the best in people, how to turn setbacks into comebacks. One of her favorite stories was about the time she accidentally put salt instead of sugar in a cake she was making for the church bake sale. Instead of throwing it away and starting over, she decided to embrace the mistake. She called it her special savory surprise cake and put a little sign next to it explaining that it was an old family recipe from the country where sweet and savory combined in unexpected ways. That cake was the first to sell. she would say, her eyes twinkling. People were curious about the unusual combination, and once they tried it, they loved it. Sometimes our mistakes turn out to be our greatest innovations. Every time she told that story, I learned something new about approaching life with creativity and courage, about the power of reframing our failures as opportunities, about the importance of owning our mistakes rather than hiding from them. This is what I want you to understand about the stories that shape us. They don't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. The quiet moments often carry the most weight. The ordinary interactions that reveal character. The small choices that demonstrate values. The everyday examples of how to be human in a complicated world. I think about the story I tell about my father learning to braid my hair. My mother was out of town for a work conference, and 7-year-old me desperately wanted pigtails for school. My father, who had never done anything more complicated with hair than running a comb through his own, spent an hour watching YouTube videos and practicing on my Barbie doll. The braids he finally managed to create were uneven and loose, with little wisps of hair sticking out everywhere. But I felt like a princess because he had tried so hard, because he had stepped outside his comfort zone to give me something I wanted, because he had made my happiness a priority. That story has become part of our family lore, but it represents something much larger than one morning's hair-doing adventure. It represents love in action, the willingness to learn new things for the people we care about, the beauty of imperfect efforts made with perfect intentions. The stories we choose to preserve become the foundation for how future generations understand themselves and their potential. When I tell my granddaughter about her great-great-grandmother who started her own business during the Depression, I'm not just sharing historical information. I'm teaching her that women in our family are entrepreneurs, risk-takers, innovators. When I recount how her grandfather learned to cook after 40 years of marriage because he wanted to take care of his wife when she was ill, I'm showing her what partnership looks like in action. But I'm also careful about the stories I don't tell, or the way I tell the ones that include difficult truths. Because stories can wound as well as heal, can limit as well as inspire. I never want my stories to suggest that struggle is shameful, or that our family's worth is tied to achievement, or that love is conditional on perfection. Every family has its shadows, the relative who struggled with addiction, the marriage that ended badly, the dreams that were never realized, the mistakes that had lasting consequences. These stories matter too, but they require careful handling. They need to be told with compassion, with context, with the understanding that everyone is fighting battles we know nothing about. I remember learning about my uncle's depression, something that was never spoken about during my childhood, but that explains so much about his quiet withdrawal from family gatherings, his long absences, the sadness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. Understanding his struggle didn't diminish him in my eyesight, made him more human, more relatable, more deserving of compassion. That's become part of our family story now, too. Understanding that mental health is as important as physical health, that asking for help is a sign of strength rather than weakness, that we support each other through all kinds of challenges. By talking openly about his experience, we've created space for others in the family to share their own struggles and seek support when they need it. This is what I want to leave behind. Stories that heal rather than harm, that inspire rather than intimidate, that connect us to something larger than ourselves, while helping us understand our own unique place in the world. I want to be remembered as someone who collected stories the way other people collect stamps, or coins carefully, lovingly, with an understanding of their value. Someone who understood that every person has a story worth telling, that every life contains moments of grace and courage and humor that deserve to be preserved. I want the stories told about me to reflect the values I tried to live by. Kindness over cleverness, compassion over judgment, hope over cynicism. I want people to remember not just what I accomplished, but how I made them feel. Not just what I said, but how I listened. Not just what I achieved, but how I loved. Because in the end, we are all just stories. The circumstances of our birth, the choices we make, the relationships we build, the challenges we face, the ways we love and laugh and grieve and grow, all of it becomes part of the great human narrative that stretches back to the beginning of time and will continue long after we're gone. The question is, what story do you want to tell? What values do you want to embed in the tales that will be told about you? What lessons do you want to pass on through the simple act of living with intention and love? These are the stories that matter. Not the headlines or the achievements that might be forgotten in a generation, but the quiet moments of connection, the daily choices to be kind, the small acts of courage that ripple out through time and touch lives in ways we may never know. Tell your stories, share your experiences, help others understand that they are not alone in their struggles, that joy is possible even after great sorrow, that love is always worth the risk of loss. Be the kind of person others will want to talk about long after you're gone, not because you were perfect, but because you were real, because you cared, because you made a difference in the ordinary moments that make up a life. Chapter 5. The Wisdom of Memory. Memory is a strange and wonderful thing. It's unreliable as a historical record, but invaluable as a teacher. The events we remember most clearly are rarely the ones that seemed most important at the time. Instead, memory chooses its own priorities, preserving the moments that shaped us, the interactions that changed us, the experiences that revealed something essential about life or love or what it means to be human. I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can recall with perfect clarity the smell of my grandmother's kitchen on Sunday mornings, coffee percolating, bacon sizzling, bread rising in the warm oven. I can't recite the details of most meetings I attended during my 30-year career, but I remember exactly how it felt the first time my daughter said, "Mama," and reached her tiny arms up to me. This selective nature of memory isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Our minds naturally filter out the mundane and preserve the meaningful. The challenge is learning to trust memory's wisdom, to pay attention to what it's trying to teach us through the moments it chooses to keep. One of my most vivid memories is of a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I was 8 years old. I had come home from school upset about something I can't even remember what now, probably some playground drama that felt earth-shattering at the time. My mother was in the middle of cooking dinner, the kitchen was chaotic with pots and pans and the general mayhem of meal preparation, but when she saw my tears, she turned off all the burners, wiped her hands on her apron, and sat down beside me at the kitchen table. "Tell me everything," she said, giving me her complete attention. For the next 20 minutes, the dinner preparations could wait. The world could wait. Nothing was more important than helping her 8-year-old daughter navigate the complicated waters of childhood disappointment. I've returned to that memory countless times over the years, especially when my own children have come to me with their troubles. It taught me that sometimes the most important thing we can offer someone is our full presence, our willingness to stop what we're doing and listen to what they're saying, not just with our ears, but with our hearts. This is what I mean by the wisdom of memory. Our minds don't just randomly hold on to experiences. They preserve the moments that contain important information about how to live, how to love, how to be present for the people who matter most to us. I remember the way my grandfather's face lit up whenever he talked about my grandmother, even after 50 years of marriage. I remember my high school English teacher who saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself and who encouraged me to apply for colleges I thought were beyond my reach. I remember the stranger who helped me change a flat tire on a deserted road at midnight, who refused my offer of money and said simply, "Just pass it on when you get the chance." These memories have become my guideposts, my instruction manual for living well. They remind me to love openly, to believe in others' potential, to offer help without expecting anything in return. They've shaped my understanding of what matters and influenced countless decisions I've made over the years. But memory isn't just about the past, it's about the future too. The memories we create today will become the wisdom that guides tomorrow's decisions. The moments we choose to preserve and share will become the foundation for how others understand the world and their place in it. This is why I'm so intentional about creating positive memories for my children and grandchildren. Not perfect memories, perfection is neither realistic nor necessary, but meaningful ones. Memories of being seen and heard and valued, Memories of laughter around the dinner table, of adventures in the backyard, of quiet conversations before bedtime. Memories of family traditions that create a sense of belonging and continuity. I want them to remember that in our house, everyone's opinion mattered, even the youngest voices. I want them to remember that we celebrated small victories as enthusiastically as big ones, that we supported each other through failures and disappointments, that love was never conditional on performance or achievement. But I also want them to remember the harder lessons. The times when we had to make difficult decisions, when we had to stand up for our values even when it was uncomfortable, when we had to admit we were wrong and ask for forgiveness. These memories are gifts too, examples of how to navigate life's complexities with integrity and grace. I think about the memory I'm creating right now, writing these words, imagining you listening to them someday when I'm no longer here to speak them directly. I want you to remember that someone cared enough about your future to sit down and think carefully about what wisdom might be useful to pass on. Someone believed that your life has value and meaning and infinite potential. Memory is also about honoring those who came before us. I carry within me the stories of my ancestors, their struggles and triumphs, their dreams and disappointments, their courage in the face of uncertainty. I am the product of countless decisions made by people I never met. People who chose love over fear, hope over despair, persistence over surrender. My great-grandmother, who left everything she knew to come to a new country with nothing but determination and faith. My grandfather, who worked 3 jobs to put himself through school because he believed education was the key to a better life. My parents, who chose to stay together and work through their problems rather than taking the easier path of separation. Their memories live on in me, in the choices I make, in the values I try to embody. And someday, my memories will live on in others, continuing the chain of wisdom and love that connects us all across time. This is what I want to leave behind. The understanding that memory is sacred, that the moments we preserve and share have the power to teach and heal and inspire long after we're gone. I want to be remembered as someone who created memories worth keeping, who understood that the ordinary moments often carry extraordinary meaning, who lived intentionally enough to leave behind a legacy of love and wisdom embedded in the experiences we shared. Pay attention to the memories that rise up unbidden in quiet moments. Listen to what they're trying to teach you. Notice the themes that emerge, the values they reflect, the lessons they contain. These are not random neural firings, they're your soul's attempt to guide you toward what matters most. And be intentional about the memories you're creating today. Choose presence over productivity. Choose connection over convenience. Choose depth over superficiality. The people in your life won't remember how clean your house was or how successful you were at work, but they will remember how you made them feel. They will remember whether you were truly there for them in the moments that mattered. Chapter 6. Life Stories Worth Telling. There's a moment in every life when we realize we've become the protagonist of our own story, rather than just a supporting character in someone else's. For me, that moment came when I was 35. Standing in the hospital room where my newborn son lay in an incubator, fighting for his life. He had arrived 8 weeks early, a tiny warrior weighing barely 3 pounds, and the doctors weren't sure he would make it through the night. As I watched his little chest rise and fall with mechanical assistance, I understood that this was my story now, not my parents' story, or my husband's story, or the story society expected me to write, but mine. And I had to decide what kind of story it would be. Would it be a story of fear and despair, of worst-case scenarios and what-ifs that paralyzed me with anxiety? Or would it be a story of hope and determination, of love so fierce it could move mountains, of faith in the incredible resilience of the human spirit? I chose hope. I chose to tell myself and everyone around me that this tiny boy was a fighter, that he had come into the world early because he was eager to begin his adventure, that every day he stayed with us was a victory worth celebrating. I chose to see the medical staff not as harbingers of doom, but as angels working miracles, to view the intimidating machines not as signs of crisis, but as instruments of healing. That choice to tell a story of hope rather than despair didn't change the medical facts, but it changed everything else. It changed how I interacted with the nurses, how I supported my husband through his own fear, how I talked to my son during the hours I spent beside his incubator. It changed the energy I brought to that sterile room, and I believe the energy he felt as he fought his way toward health. 18 years later, that premature baby is a healthy, strong young man preparing for college. The story I chose to tell in those early days became the foundation for the story of his life, a story of overcoming challenges, of exceeding expectations, of never giving up even when the odds seem impossible. This is what I've learned about life stories. We have more control over them than we think. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we interpret what happens to us. We can choose to see ourselves as victims or as heroes, as people to whom life happens or as people who happen to life. I think about my friend Sarah, who was diagnosed with breast cancer at 42. She could have told the story as a tragedy. Why me? Why now? How unfair that this should happen when her children were still young and needed her so much. Instead, she chose to tell it as a story of discovery, of finding out how strong she was, how much love surrounded her, how precious every ordinary day could be when you stopped taking them for granted. She documented her treatment journey not with complaints, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the medical advances that made her treatment possible, for the friends who rallied around her family, for the way her children stepped up to help with household responsibilities, for the husband who held her hand through every chemotherapy session. Cancer taught me how to live, she told me after her final treatment. Before, I was so busy planning for the future that I forgot to show up for the present. Now I notice everything, the way morning light falls across the kitchen table, the sound of my kids laughing in the next room, the feeling of my husband's hand in mine while we watch a movie. Sarah's story became a source of inspiration for everyone who knew her, not because she denied the difficulty of what she was going through, but because she chose to focus on the gifts that came with the challenge. She transformed a potentially devastating chapter into a story of awakening and appreciation. This is the kind of life story I want to leave behind, not one that pretends hardship doesn't exist, but one that demonstrates how to find meaning and purpose even in the midst of struggle. A story that shows it's possible to be broken and beautiful at the same time, to be wounded and wise, to carry scars that become sources of strength rather than shame. I want to be remembered as someone who understood that we are all the authors of our own narratives, that we get to choose the lens through which we view our experiences, that we have the power to write ourselves as heroes of our own stories rather than victims of circumstance. But I also want to be remembered as someone who understood that a good story includes struggle. The hero's journey isn't about avoiding challenges, it's about facing them with courage and growing stronger in the process. The most compelling stories include conflict, setbacks, moments of doubt and despair, because those are the moments that reveal character and create opportunities for transformation. I think about the year my husband lost his job during the recession, when we had to drastically downsize our lifestyle and I had to return to work after being home with the children for 10 years. It would have been easy to tell that story as one of loss and disappointment, of dreams deferred and security shattered. Instead, we chose to tell it as an adventure. We called it our year of living creatively, when we learned to make do with less, to find joy in simple pleasures, to discover talents and interests we never knew we had. My husband started painting, something he'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I began writing, rediscovering a passion I'd set aside when the children were born. We played board games instead of going to movies, took walks in the park instead of expensive vacations, cooked elaborate meals together instead of eating out. That year, which could have been our worst, became in many ways our best. We grew closer as a family, more creative as individuals, more grateful for what we had rather than focused on what we lacked. We learned that happiness isn't dependent on circumstances but on attitude, that security comes not from what we own but from who we are and who we love. This is the story I want to leave behind, that every life contains the raw material for an inspiring narrative, that challenges are opportunities in disguise, that the chapters we think might end our story often turn out to be the ones that make it worth reading. I want to be remembered as someone who lived deliberately, who made conscious choices about how to interpret and respond to life's inevitable ups and downs. Someone who understood that the stories we tell about ourselves become self-fulfilling prophecies, that describing ourselves as blessed rather than burdened actually makes us more likely to recognize and appreciate our blessings. But most of all, I want to be remembered as someone whose story intersected meaningfully with others, who understood that the best narratives are not soliloquies but conversations, not solo performances, but ensemble pieces. I want my story to be one of connection and community, of love given and received, of lives touched and hearts opened. Because in the end, the stories worth telling are not just about individual achievement or personal triumph. They're about how we loved, how we served, how we showed up for others in their moments of need. They're about the threads of connection that weave us together into the larger tapestry of human experience. What story are you telling about your life? What narrative are you choosing to live? Remember, you are both the author and the protagonist of your own story. You get to decide whether it's a tragedy or a comedy, an adventure or a romance, a tale of woe or a song of triumph. Choose wisely, choose courageously, choose love. And remember that every day offers you the opportunity to write a new chapter, to change direction, to become the person you were meant to be. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Your life, with all its ordinary moments and extraordinary possibilities, matters more than you know. Chapter 7. The invisible threads that bind us. If you could see the invisible threads that connect every human being to every other human being, the world would look like an intricate web of light, pulsing with every act of kindness, every moment of understanding, every gesture of love that passes between us. We are not separate beings moving through isolated experiences. We are part of an interconnected tapestry where every thread matters, where every life touches countless others in ways we rarely recognize. I learned this lesson on a Tuesday morning, in a grocery store checkout line, of all places. I was having one of those days when everything seemed to be going wrong. I'd overslept, spilled coffee on my shirt, gotten stuck in traffic, and now I was running late for an important meeting while standing behind an elderly woman who was counting out exact change with shaking hands, much to the obvious frustration of the customers behind me. The cashier, a young man who couldn't have been more than 19, watched patiently as she counted coins, never rushing her, never showing annoyance. When she came up 37 cents short, he quietly reached into his own pocket and made up the difference without making a show of it. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, patting his hand. "You remind me of my grandson." In that moment, I witnessed something beautiful. One person choosing kindness over convenience. One person seeing beyond the inconvenience to the humanity of another. And it changed my entire day. The frustration I'd been carrying melted away, replaced by something warmer and more hopeful. When I got to my meeting, I found myself speaking more patiently, listening more carefully, approaching the challenges with a gentleness I might not have summoned otherwise. That young cashier's kindness to one elderly woman rippled out through me to affect every person I interacted with that day, and probably through them to affect people I would never meet. This is how the invisible threads work. Kindness multiplies, compassion spreads, love expands in widening circles that touch lives in ways we can't even imagine. But the threads carry pain as well as joy, hurt as well as healing. The angry words we speak in frustration, the patience we withhold when someone needs it most, the kindness we choose not to offer, these two ripple outward, creating waves of negativity that can impact far more people than we realize. I remember snapping at my teenage daughter one morning because I was stressed about work deadlines and she was moving too slowly getting ready for school. My harsh words sent her out the door feeling criticized and unloved, which affected how she interacted with her friends, which influenced the mood in her first period class, which probably touched the lives of every student and teacher in that room, in small but measurable ways. Later that day, when I realized what I had done, I called her at school to apologize. Not because I thought it would undo the damage words, once spoken, can't be taken back, but because I wanted to send a different kind of energy out into the world. I wanted the threads connecting us to carry love and accountability rather than hurt and anger. I was wrong to speak to you that way this morning, I told her. I was stressed about my own problems and I took it out on you, and that wasn't fair. You deserve better from me, and I'm sorry. The relief in her voice was palpable. Thanks, Mom. I was having a terrible day and I wasn't sure why. This is what I want you to understand about the invisible threads. We are always affecting each other, always influencing the energy and mood and possibilities of every room we enter, every conversation we have, every interaction we participate in. We have tremendous power to heal or to harm, to lift others up or to tear them down, and most of the time we're not even aware of the impact we're having. But once you start paying attention to the threads, once you begin to see how interconnected we all are, it changes how you move through the world. You start to realize that every encounter is an opportunity to make someone's day a little brighter or a little darker, that every conversation is a chance to offer the gift of being truly heard and seen. I think about Mrs. Patterson, my fourth grade teacher, who saw that I was struggling with my parents' divorce and started keeping me after school to help with classroom tasks. She never made a big deal about it, never called attention to what she was doing, but she gave me a safe space to be sad, to ask questions, to feel normal when everything else in my life felt chaotic. Years later, when I was going through my own divorce, I found myself doing the same thing for a neighbor's child whose parents were having troubles. I didn't make a conscious decision to channel Mrs. Patterson. It just happened naturally, as if the kindness she had shown me had been dormant in my heart all those years, waiting for the right moment to emerge and flow towards someone else who needed it. This is how love travels through time, how wisdom passes from one generation to the next, how healing spreads from person to person through the invisible network that connects us all. We carry within us the gifts we've received from others, and we pass them on, often without even realizing we're doing it. But we can be more intentional about it. We can choose to be conscious of the threads, aware of our influence, deliberate about the energy we bring to every interaction. We can ask ourselves, what am I contributing to this conversation? What kind of ripples am I sending out into the world? How can I use this moment to make things a little bit better rather than a little bit worse? I want to be remembered as someone who understood the power of connection, who saw the threads and chose to send love along them whenever possible. Someone who realized that we are not isolated individuals, but part of a vast, interconnected web of human experience, where every action matters, every word has weight, every choice creates consequences that extend far beyond ourselves. I want to leave behind the understanding that kindness is never wasted, that compassion always matters, that the small gestures we think no one notices often have the greatest impact. The smile to a stranger, the patient response to an unreasonable request, the willingness to listen when someone needs to be heard. These are not insignificant acts, but threads of gold woven into the tapestry of human connection. And I want to leave behind the wisdom that we are all more alike than different, that beneath the surface variations of race and culture and belief and circumstance, we all share the same basic needs: to be loved, to be valued, to be seen and understood and accepted for who we are. When we remember this, when we look for the humanity in every person we encounter, the threads that connect us become visible and bright. This is the legacy I want to create. An understanding that we are all part of something larger than ourselves, that our lives have meaning not just in isolation, but in connection, that the love we give and receive creates an invisible network of support and hope that sustains us all. Pay attention to the threads. Be conscious of your influence. Choose kindness whenever possible. Remember that you are connected to every other person on this planet by invisible bonds of shared humanity, and what you do with that connection, how you honor it, how you nurture it, how you use it to spread love rather than fear, that's the most important work you'll ever do. Chapter 8. What remains when everything else falls away. There comes a moment in every life when you realize that everything you've been clutching so tightly, your plans, your certainties, your sense of control over your circumstances can disappear in an instant. For me, that moment came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in March, when the phone rang with news that would change everything I thought I knew about what matters. My sister had been in an accident. Not just any accident, but the kind that makes you understand that life is more fragile than you ever imagined, that the people you love can be here one moment and gone the next, that all the things you've been worrying about suddenly seem insignificant in the face of what really counts. As I sat in that hospital waiting room, watching the sun rise over a day I never wanted to experience, everything else fell away. The work deadline I'd been stressed about for weeks suddenly seemed absurd. The argument I'd had with my husband about money felt petty and pointless. The social obligations I'd been worried about fulfilling seemed like elaborate games played by people who didn't understand what life was actually about. What remained was stark and simple: love. The fierce, protective, overwhelming love I felt for my sister. The gratitude for every moment we'd shared, every conversation we'd had, every laugh we'd enjoyed together. The desperate wish that I had told her more often how much she meant to me, how proud I was of the woman she'd become, how grateful I was to have her as both sister and friend. Sitting there in that sterile room, I made a mental inventory of what actually mattered to me, and the list was surprisingly short: family, friends, love, health, time, connection. Everything else, the achievements I'd been so proud of, the possessions I'd worked so hard to acquire, the status symbols I'd thought were important, all of it faded into background noise. My sister survived, thank God, though the recovery was long and difficult. But that night in the hospital waiting room changed me forever. It taught me to live from the center of what matters, rather than the periphery of what seems urgent. It showed me the difference between being busy and being purposeful, between accumulating experiences and creating meaning. This is what I want to leave behind. The understanding that when everything else falls away, and it will, because loss is part of the human experience, what remains is love. Not the sentimental greeting card version of love, but the real thing, the love that shows up, the love that stays, the love that persists even when it's difficult, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs us something. I think about my friend Margaret, who spent the last 2 years of her mother's life driving 3 hours every weekend to care for a woman who no longer recognized her, who sometimes mistook her for a stranger, who could be difficult and demanding and grateful all in the same conversation. Margaret's friends often asked how she could keep making that drive, keep showing up for someone who couldn't even remember her name. Because love isn't about being remembered, Margaret said. It's about remembering. It's about honoring the relationship we had, even if she can't. It's about being the person she raised me to be, even when she can't see it. That's the kind of love that remains when everything else falls away. The love that's not dependent on reciprocity or recognition or reward. The love that gives simply because giving is what love does. The love that understands that caring for others is not a burden, but a privilege, not a duty, but a gift we give ourselves as much as we give to them. I want to be remembered as someone who loved this way. Someone who understood that relationships are not transactions but treasures, that time spent with people we care about is never time wasted, that showing up for others is how we show up for ourselves. But I also want to leave behind the understanding that loss, while painful, is also sacred. That grief is love with nowhere to go, that mourning is how we honor what we've been given, that the empty spaces left by those we've lost are not voids but shrines where we keep their memory alive. When my mother died, I thought I would never recover from the magnitude of that loss. She had been my anchor, my advisor, my friend. The idea of navigating the world without her guidance seemed impossible. But gradually, I began to realize that she hadn't really left me at all. She lived on in the way I comforted my children when they were scared, in the recipes I cooked for my family, in the values I tried to embody, in the lessons I passed on to the next generation. This is what remains when everything else falls away. The parts of the people we love that we've internalized, the ways they continue to influence us long after they're gone, the eternal nature of the bonds we create with others. Death can take away someone's physical presence, but it cannot touch the love that connects us, the memories that sustain us, the influence that continues to shape us. I want to live in such a way that when I'm gone, I remain present in the lives I've touched, not as a ghost or a burden of grief, but as a source of love and wisdom and encouragement. I want people to carry the best parts of me forward, to hear my voice in their moments of doubt, to feel my love in their times of need, to be strengthened by the faith I had in their potential. This is why relationships matter more than achievements, why presence matters more than productivity, why love matters more than anything else we might think we're here to accomplish. Because relationships are what survive us. Love is what lasts. Connection is what creates meaning that transcends our individual existence. When everything else falls away, the careers we built, the houses we lived in, the cars we drove, the clothes we wore, the awards we won, what remains is how we loved and how we were loved in return. What remains is the kindness we showed, the patience we offered, the forgiveness we extended, the hope we inspired in others. What remains is the part of ourselves that we gave away freely, knowing that love multiplies when it's shared rather than diminishing. What remains is the investment we made in other people's happiness, other people's growth, other people's dreams and aspirations. This is the legacy that truly matters, the inheritance that can never be lost or stolen or diminished by time or circumstance. This is what I want to leave behind. The understanding that when we love fully and live deeply and show up completely for the people in our lives, we create something eternal, something that will outlast our physical presence and continue to make the world a better place long after we're gone. So love boldly, love without reservation. Love not just the people who love you back, but the ones who need it most. Love not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. Love not just with your words, but with your presence, your attention, your willingness to put someone else's needs before your own. Because in the end, when everything else falls away, love is what remains, and that's enough. That's everything. Chapter 9. Letters to Tomorrow. If I could reach across time and speak directly to the children who will inherit this world, my grandchildren, their children, the generations yet to come, what would I want them to know? What wisdom would I want to pass on to people I may never meet, but whose lives will be shaped by the choices we make today? I would start with this: you are loved beyond measure, not for what you accomplish or achieve, but simply for being who you are. Before you ever took your first breath, before you ever spoke your first word, before you ever took your first step, you were loved completely and unconditionally. This love is your birthright, your foundation, your source of strength when the world tells you otherwise. The world will try to convince you that love must be earned, that your worth is conditional on your performance, that you must prove yourself worthy of acceptance and affection. This is not true. You are worthy of love simply because you exist. You matter simply because you are here. You have value that no failure can diminish and no success can increase. But dear ones, loving yourself is not always easy. There will be times when you look in the mirror and see only flaws, times when you compare yourself to others and feel inadequate, times when you make mistakes and wonder if you're fundamentally broken. In those moments, remember this: you are a work in progress, a masterpiece being created one brushstroke at a time. Your imperfections are not defects, they're proof that you're human, that you're growing, that you're brave enough to try, even when success isn't guaranteed. I want you to know that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. Every person who has ever accomplished anything meaningful has also failed spectacularly at times. The difference between those who ultimately succeed and those who give up is not the absence of failure, but the response to it. Learn from your mistakes. Get back up when you fall. Try again with the wisdom that comes from experience. And please, dear ones, be kind to each other. In a world that often seems divided by different Caesars, religion, politics, economics, remember that what we share is far more significant than what separates us. We all want to be loved. We all want to matter. We all want to feel safe and valued and understood. When you remember this, when you look for the humanity in every person you encounter, you become a bridge builder rather than a wall builder. Practice empathy. Try to understand why people believe what they believe, feel what they feel, act the way they act. This doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone or accept harmful behavior, but it means approaching others with curiosity rather than judgment, with compassion rather than contempt. You have no idea what burdens others are carrying, what pain they're hiding, what battles they're fighting. A little kindness can make all the difference. Take care of this beautiful planet you've inherited. It's the only home we have, and it's more fragile than it appears. Make choices that consider not just your immediate needs, but the needs of future generations. Consume thoughtfully. Waste nothing. Find joy in simple pleasures rather than constantly seeking more. Remember that enough is enough, that contentment comes not from having everything you want, but from wanting what you have. Don't be afraid to be different. The world needs your unique perspective, your individual talents, your distinctive way of seeing and understanding and creating. Conformity is safe but boring. Innovation requires the courage to stand apart from the crowd, to think differently, to risk being misunderstood. Some of the greatest contributions to human progress have come from people who are willing to be different, to challenge conventional thinking, to pursue their vision even when others couldn't see it. But also, don't be afraid to ask for help. Strength is not the absence of need, it's the wisdom to recognize when you need support and the courage to seek it. We are not meant to navigate this life alone. We are designed for community, for connection, for mutual aid and support. There is no shame in admitting you don't have all the answers, that you're struggling, that you could use a hand or a hug or just someone to listen. Learn to forgive, both others and yourself. Holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. Forgiveness doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior or pretending that hurt didn't happen. It means choosing to release the grip that past pain has on your present happiness. It means deciding that your peace of mind is more important than someone else's debt to you. Find work that matters to you, not just work that pays well. Yes, you need to be able to support yourself and your family, but you also need to feel that your time and energy are being invested in something meaningful. Look for ways to make a positive difference, whether through your career or your volunteer activities, or simply through the way you treat the people you encounter every day. Read books, lots of them. Books will introduce you to ideas and perspectives and worlds you might never encounter otherwise. They will make you more empathetic, more knowledgeable, more articulate. They will be your companions in solitude and your teachers throughout your life. The person who reads lives, 1,000 lives, the person who doesn't read only one. Travel when you can, but remember that the most important journey is the one inward. Explore your own heart and mind with the same curiosity you bring to foreign countries. Understand your own motivations, fears, dreams, and limitations. Self-knowledge is the foundation of wisdom, and wisdom is more valuable than any treasure you might accumulate. Love deeply, even though it means risking loss. The alternative, protecting yourself from pain by avoiding connection, is not really protection at all. It's a kind of death, a shutting down of the very thing that makes life worth living. Yes, love can hurt. Yes, people you care about will disappoint you, leave you, break your heart. But the pain of loving is still preferable to the emptiness of not loving at all. And finally, dear ones, remember that your life has purpose. Even when you can't see it clearly, you don't have to change the world to make a difference. You don't have to be famous or wealthy or powerful to matter. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is hold someone's hand when they're scared, listen when they need to be heard, show up when everyone else has walked away. You are part of a long chain of human experience, connected to everyone who came before you and everyone who will come after. The love you give, the kindness you show, the courage you demonstrate, all of it ripples forward through time, touching lives in ways you may never know. So live fully, love freely, learn constantly, laugh often, forgive quickly, hope persistently. And remember always that you are cherished beyond words by people you've never met, but who believe in your potential, who trust in your goodness, who are proud to share this human journey with you across the years. With all my love and highest hopes for your future, the past speaking to tomorrow. Epilogue. What we leave behind. As I come to the end of these reflections, I find myself thinking about a conversation I had with my grandmother shortly before she died. She was 93 then, sharp as ever but increasingly aware that her time was growing short. We were sitting on her back porch, watching the sun set over the garden she had tended for 40 years. "What do you think you'll be remembered for?" I asked her, a question that seemed important then and seems even more important now. She was quiet for a long moment, and I thought maybe she was too tired to answer. Then she smiled that gentle, knowing smile I had loved my entire life. "I hope they remember that I paid attention," she said, "that I noticed when someone was hurting and tried to help, that I celebrated the good moments and didn't take them for granted. That I loved without conditions and forgave without keeping score." She paused, looking out over her roses. "I hope they remember that I showed up." Showed up. Such simple words, but they contain the essence of what it means to live a meaningful life. To be present, to be available, to be willing to step into other people's joys and sorrows, to offer what we can, to stay when things get difficult. This is what I want to leave behind, understanding that showing up is the most important thing we can do for each other. Not showing up perfectly, not showing up with all the answers, not showing up without our own struggles and limitations, just showing up, being present, being willing to be part of each other's stories. I want to be remembered as someone who understood that life is not a solo performance, but a collaboration, that we are all in this together, that our individual stories only make sense in the context of the larger human narrative we're all writing together. I want to leave behind the knowledge that love is the only thing that truly multiplies when it's divided, that kindness is never wasted, that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves as much as we give to others. I want to leave behind the understanding that we are all more resilient than we know, more connected than we realize, more loved than we can imagine. Most of all, I want to leave behind hope. Hope that the future will be brighter than the past, that the children growing up today will be wiser and kinder than we were, that the problems that seem insurmountable today will be solved by minds we haven't met and hearts we haven't touched, but who carry forward the best of what we've tried to teach them. This is my legacy, my love letter to the future, my attempt to reach across time and space to touch the lives of people I will never meet, but whose happiness matters to me simply because they are human, because they are part of this beautiful, complicated, heartbreaking, hope-filled experience we call life. If you've listened to these words, if you've allowed them into your heart and mind, then you carry them forward now. You become part of the legacy, part of the chain of love and wisdom and hope that connects us all across the generations. Take what serves you. Leave what doesn't. Add your own insights, your own discoveries, your own hard-won wisdom, and then pass it all forward, in whatever way feels right to you, knowing that every life touched is a victory, every heart opened is a triumph. Every person who feels less alone because of something you said or did is a legacy worth leaving. We are all more than we know. We matter more than we realize. We are connected in ways that make every act of love, every gesture of kindness, every moment of genuine presence a gift not just to the recipient, but to the entire human family. This is what I want to leave behind. This is what remains when everything else falls away. This is the inheritance that truly matters, not what we accumulated, but what we gave away. Not what we achieved, but who we loved. Not what we left to our children, but what we left in them. Love, hope, connection, the understanding that we are all part of something larger than ourselves, something beautiful and meaningful and eternal. This is what I want to leave behind. This is what we all can leave behind. This is what matters.